The rancher hired an Apache widow to clean the barn. Then he found his children asleep in her arms. The ranch had been quiet for a long time. Not the peaceful kind of quiet, but the heavy kind that sits in the chest and refuses to move. The rancher had lived on that land for most of his life. He knew every fence post, every creak of the old barn, every sound the wind made when it passed through the dry grass. But since his wife passed away, the place felt different. The land was the same, the animals were the same, yet something important was missing. Each morning, he woke up before sunrise just like he always had. He pulled on his worn boots, washed his face with cold water and stepped outside. The sky would slowly turn from dark blue to pale gold. The cows needed feeding, the horses needed checking, and the fences always seemed to need fixing. He did all of it without complaint, but the weight of responsibility never left his shoulders. He was not just running a ranch anymore. He was raising 2 young children on his own. His son was quiet now, much quieter than before. His daughter used to laugh loudly, but those laughs had become rare. They missed their mother in ways they did not know how to explain. Sometimes they asked questions, sometimes they stayed silent for days. The rancher tried his best, but there were moments when he felt completely lost. He cooked meals, washed clothes, helped with homework, and tucked them into bed at night, yet he always felt he was falling short. The barn had become the biggest problem. It needed regular cleaning, but between the ranch work and the children, he simply didn't have the time or energy anymore. Dust gathered in the corners. Tools were left where they shouldn't be. The smell of hay and animals grew stronger each day. He knew it wasn't safe, and it certainly wasn't how he used to run things. One afternoon, while picking up supplies in town, he overheard a conversation outside the general store. 2 men were talking quietly, mentioning a woman who had recently arrived nearby. They said she was an Apache widow, living alone, looking for honest work. She was willing to clean, cook, or do any task offered to her. The men spoke with uncertainty, and their tone carried old judgments that the rancher recognized immediately. He had grown up hearing the same kind of talk. He stood there longer than he planned, pretending to check a list in his pocket. The idea stayed with him as he drove back to the ranch. Hiring someone would help. It would give him time to focus on the animals and his children. Still, he hesitated. Not because of who she was, but because inviting someone new into his broken routine felt risky. His home had already been shaken once. He wasn't sure he could handle another change. That night after the children were asleep, he sat alone at the kitchen table. The lamp cast a soft yellow light over the room. His wife's old chair remained empty, just as it had for months. He thought about the barn, the children, and the woman he had never met. He wondered what kind of loss she carried, what kind of life had led her there. By the time the lamp flickered and the room grew quiet again, he had made a decision. The next day, he asked around and learned where the woman was staying. It was a small, worn-down place not far from the edge of town. When he arrived, he stayed in his truck for a moment, gripping the steering wheel. Finally, he stepped out and walked toward the door. He knocked once, then waited. She opened the door slowly. She was calm, her expression guarded but respectful. Her clothes were simple and clean, and her dark hair was pulled back neatly. She listened without interrupting as he explained why he was there. He told her he needed help cleaning the barn and doing light work around the ranch. He spoke clearly, keeping his words simple and honest. She nodded and thanked him for the opportunity. She didn't ask for more pay than he offered. She didn't question his rules. She simply said she would work hard and respect his home. There was something steady in her voice that surprised him. They agreed she would start the next morning. When she arrived at the ranch, the children watched from the porch. They stood close together, holding onto each other, unsure of what to think. The rancher introduced them briefly, then showed the woman the barn. She listened carefully, taking in every detail, and began working without delay. She moved quietly, efficiently. She swept, organized tools, and cleared old hay with patience. There was no rush in her movements, yet nothing was wasted. The rancher watched from a distance while repairing a fence. He noticed how the barn slowly changed, not just in appearance but in feeling. It seemed calmer somehow, as if the space itself was breathing easier. The children wandered closer as the day went on. At first, they stayed near the doorway, peeking inside. She smiled at them gently but did not force conversation. She allowed them to come closer on their own terms. When they asked simple questions, she answered softly. When they stayed quiet, she respected that too. By evening, the barn was cleaner than it had been in months. The rancher paid her and thanked her. She thanked him back, lowered her head slightly, and left for the day. As he watched her walk away, he felt something unfamiliar. It wasn't relief alone. It was a sense that he had taken a small step toward balance, even if he didn't fully understand why. That night the children talked more at dinner than they had in weeks. They mentioned the woman, her kindness, and how she showed them how to hold a broom properly. The rancher listened, surprised by how such a small thing had lifted their spirits. When the house grew quiet again, he sat on the porch, looking out at the land. The stars were bright and the air was cool. For the first time in a long while, the silence didn't feel so heavy. He knew challenges still lay ahead. Grief doesn't disappear overnight. But somewhere between the dust of the barn and the soft voices of his children, something had begun to change. The next few days followed a quiet pattern, but something about the ranch felt different. The rancher noticed it early in the mornings. When he stepped outside, the air felt lighter, even though the work waiting for him was the same. The animals still needed care, the fences still needed fixing, and the land still demanded his strength. Yet his mind felt less crowded than before. The woman arrived every morning just after sunrise. She never came late and never arrived too early. She greeted him with a polite nod and went straight to work. She did not waste time talking, and she did not look around with curiosity. It was as if she understood that this place carried pain and should be treated gently. She focused on the barn first. Day by day, she cleaned areas that had been ignored for too long. She brushed down wooden beams, organized tools, and made small repairs where she could. She didn't ask for help, but when the rancher offered, she accepted it without pride or discomfort. They worked side by side sometimes, exchanging only a few words, but there was no awkwardness between them. The children noticed her presence more than anyone else. At first, they only watched from a distance. The boy stayed close to the fence, pretending to play with sticks. The girl sat on the steps with her knees pulled close, studying the woman's movements. The woman never stared back. She allowed them to observe in their own time. One afternoon, the girl finally spoke. She asked what the woman was doing with a pile of old cloth. The woman smiled and explained she was cleaning it to reuse for wiping tools. Her voice was soft, steady, and warm. The girl nodded, satisfied, and returned to watching. That small exchange was enough to break a wall that had been standing for months. As the days passed, the children began to follow her into the barn. They stayed close, careful not to get in the way. She gave them simple tasks when they asked, like holding a bucket or sweeping small areas. When they made mistakes, she never corrected them sharply. She simply showed them again, slowly and patiently. The rancher noticed changes in his children before he noticed them in himself. His son started asking questions again, curious ones about animals and tools. His daughter hummed softly while walking around the yard. These sounds had been missing for a long time. He didn't comment on it, afraid that speaking about it might make it disappear. The woman never tried to take the role of a parent. She didn't tell the children what to do unless they asked. She didn't interfere with the rancher's authority. Instead, she created a quiet space where the children felt safe being themselves. The rancher saw this clearly, and it filled him with both gratitude and confusion. Sometimes, when he was working far from the house, he noticed the barn door open and heard soft voices inside. He never rushed over. He trusted what he was seeing from a distance. Trust was something he had learned to value deeply after losing so much. In the evenings, when the woman finished her work, she always cleaned her hands and tools carefully. She thanked the rancher and left without lingering. She never asked for extra hours or special treatment. Her presence was steady, not demanding, and that steadiness brought calm to a place that had been filled with uncertainty. One evening, the rancher asked her if she needed anything: better tools, warmer gloves, or more supplies. She thanked him but said she had everything she needed. Then she paused just for a moment and asked if the children liked helping. He nodded and said they did. She smiled, and that smile carried a quiet sadness he recognized too well. That night, after the children went to bed, the rancher thought about her words. He realized that she wasn't just cleaning the barn. She was giving his children something he had struggled to give them alone: gentle attention without pressure. She didn't try to fix their pain. She simply allowed them to exist with it. The next day, rain fell heavily. The ground turned muddy and work slowed down. The woman stayed in the barn, organizing shelves and wiping down surfaces. The children joined her again, laughing softly when the rain splashed outside. The sound carried across the ranch, and the rancher paused his work to listen. That sound brought back memories he hadn't allowed himself to touch. He remembered how his wife used to laugh during rainy days, how she would make simple games out of ordinary moments. The memory didn't hurt the way it used to. It still carried sadness, but it also carried warmth. Later that afternoon, he walked into the barn to bring fresh towels. He stopped near the entrance without being seen. The children were sitting on overturned crates, listening as the woman told them a simple story from her childhood. There was no drama in it, just quiet moments about family, land, and learning to be patient. The children listened closely, completely at ease. He stepped back quietly, not wanting to interrupt. As he walked away, he realized something important. The woman was not filling a space meant for his wife. She was helping the children find stability again. There was a difference, and that difference mattered. Over the following weeks, the barn became a place of order and calm. The animals responded too, moving more easily, less restless than before. The rancher felt proud of his land again. He felt capable in a way he hadn't felt since his wife passed away. The woman remained the same throughout it all. She did her work, cared quietly, and never crossed boundaries. Sometimes the rancher caught her looking out toward the distant hills, her expression thoughtful and distant. He never asked what she was thinking. He knew grief doesn't always need words. One evening, as the sun dipped low, the children ran ahead toward the house, leaving the rancher and the woman behind. He thanked her again for her hard work. She nodded and said she was grateful for the chance to work in peace. Their eyes met briefly, and in that moment they shared an understanding that went beyond words. Neither of them knew what the future would bring. They were not planning anything beyond the next day's work. But as the light faded and the land grew quiet, it was clear that something important was forming. Not loudly, not suddenly, but gently, like healing that begins when no one is watching. That day began like any other. The rancher woke before sunrise, feeling the familiar stiffness in his back as he pulled on his boots. The sky was still dark, and the air was cool. He moved quietly through the house so he wouldn't wake the children. They had been sleeping better lately, and he didn't want to disturb that peace. The woman arrived just after the first light appeared over the hills. She greeted him with a nod and went straight to the barn. The children ate breakfast at the table, talking softly to each other. When they finished, they asked if they could help in the barn again. The rancher agreed, reminding them to be careful. He watched them walk outside, side by side, before turning his attention to the fence line that needed repair. The day grew warmer as the sun climbed higher. The rancher worked steadily, replacing broken boards and tightening loose wire. Time passed quickly, the way it sometimes does when the body is busy but the mind is quiet. He glanced toward the barn now and then, seeing movement inside, hearing faint sounds of sweeping and soft voices. Everything seemed normal. Around midday, he decided to take a short break. He wiped his hands on his jeans and headed toward the house to get water. As he passed the yard, he noticed the porch was empty. The children were not there. That wasn't unusual. They often wandered around the ranch now, exploring with more confidence than before. He drank some water and rested for a few minutes, then returned to work. Another hour passed. The sun was high and the heat settled over the land. When he finished the last section of fence, he stood up straight and stretched. He decided it was time to call the children in for lunch. He walked toward the house first, expecting to hear their voices or see them playing nearby. The rooms were quiet. He checked the yard, then the small shed near the house. Still nothing. A small feeling of concern began to form in his chest. It wasn't panic yet, but it was close. He called their names, loud enough to carry across the open land. No answer came back. He walked faster now, checking the areas where they usually played. His heart beat a little quicker with each step. He reminded himself that the ranch was familiar to them, that they knew where to go. Still, worry has a way of growing once it starts. Finally, he turned toward the barn. As he walked closer, he noticed the door was partly closed. Sunlight slipped through the cracks in the wood. The sounds from inside were gone. No sweeping, no voices. He slowed his steps without realizing it, his hand reaching for the door. When he pushed it open, he stopped. Inside the barn, the light was soft and golden. Dust floated gently in the air. Near the far wall, sitting on a folded blanket, was the woman. Her back was against a stack of clean hay. In her arms, his two children were asleep. His son rested against her shoulder, his face calm and relaxed. His daughter lay curled against her side, one small hand gripping the woman's sleeve. The woman sat very still, her arms wrapped around them carefully, as if she were afraid even breathing too deeply might wake them. For a long moment, the rancher could not move. The sight in front of him felt unreal, like something from a memory or a dream. His first reaction was confusion. His second was fear. 1,000 questions rushed through his mind at once, but before any words could form, something else stopped him. The children looked peaceful. He had not seen them like that in a long time, not since before their mother passed away. Their faces were soft, free of the tension that had followed them for months. They were not restless. They were not holding themselves tight. They were simply resting. The woman noticed him then. Her eyes lifted slowly, meeting his. She did not speak. She did not move. There was a look of concern in her face, as if she expected him to be upset. Her arms tightened slightly around the children, protective but gentle. He stood there, his heart pounding, unsure of what to do next. Minutes seemed to pass, though it was probably only seconds. The barn felt incredibly quiet, as if the entire place was holding its breath. Finally, he stepped inside and closed the door softly behind him. The sound was barely a whisper. "They fell asleep," she said quietly. Her voice was calm but careful. "I didn't want to wake them." He nodded, though he wasn't sure she could see it. His throat felt tight. He cleared it before speaking. "How long?" he asked. "Not long," she replied. "They were tired. They sat down and it just happened." He looked at his children again. His daughter's hair was messy, her face smudged with dirt. His son's boots were still on, one foot hanging slightly over the edge of the blanket. They looked safe. They looked cared for. He had imagined many things when he came looking for them. This was not one of them. "I can take them," he said softly. She nodded, carefully adjusting her hold so he could lift them. He picked up his daughter first, cradling her gently. She stirred slightly but did not wake. Then he lifted his son, surprised by how heavy he felt now. Time had passed faster than he realized. As he stood there holding them, he felt a wave of emotion he hadn't expected. Relief came first, then gratitude. Then something deeper, something harder to name. The woman stood slowly, giving him space. She kept her eyes lowered, her hands folded in front of her. She looked ready to explain herself if needed, ready to accept whatever he decided. He carried the children toward the door and paused. He turned back to her. "Thank you," he said. She looked up, surprised. "I only watched over them," she replied. "That's more than enough," he said quietly. He took the children to the house and laid them down on their beds. They slept on, undisturbed. He stood there for a long time, watching them breathe, listening to the quiet rise and fall of their chests. When he returned to the barn, the woman was cleaning up the area where they had been sitting. She folded the blanket carefully as if it were something important. He leaned against the wall, unsure how to begin. The moment had changed something between them. He could feel it. "They don't usually sleep like that," he said. She nodded. "They told me they don't sleep well." He swallowed. "They haven't since their mother passed." She looked at him then, her eyes full of understanding. "Loss stays with you," she said softly, "but sometimes rest finds you when you least expect it." He didn't reply right away. He was thinking about all the times he had tried to be strong for his children, all the times he had pushed himself to keep going without rest. "I didn't know," he said finally, "that they felt safe enough." She gave a small, gentle smile. "Children know when someone is calm inside," she said. "They look for that." Her words stayed with him long after she left for the day. That evening, the children woke up refreshed. They talked about the barn, about the blanket, about how warm it was inside. They spoke with a lightness he hadn't heard in their voices before. As he tucked them into bed that night, he realized something important. He had been so focused on holding everything together that he hadn't noticed how tired they all were. Outside, the land settled into silence. Inside, for the first time in a long while, the rancher felt something close to peace. He didn't know what the future held. He didn't know how things would change, but he knew one thing clearly. That moment in the barn had marked a turning point. Nothing would be quite the same after that. The days after that moment in the barn did not return to how they were before. Something had shifted, quietly but clearly, and everyone on the ranch could feel it. The rancher did not speak about what he had seen right away, but the memory stayed with him through every task he did. While feeding the animals, while fixing tools, while walking the land, the image returned again and again. His children sleeping peacefully, safe and calm, in the arms of someone who had entered their lives without force or demand. The next morning he woke to the sound of his children moving around the kitchen on their own. That alone surprised him. They were talking softly, not arguing, not dragging their feet. When he entered the room, they looked up and smiled. It was a small thing, but it felt important. They ate breakfast together, and his daughter mentioned the barn again. She said it felt warm and quiet there. His son nodded and said he liked helping clean because it made him feel useful. The rancher listened carefully, realizing how long it had been since his children had spoken with such ease. When the woman arrived that morning, the air between them was different. Not uncomfortable, but aware. They exchanged greetings like usual, but this time there was something more in their eyes. He thanked her again, more clearly this time, for watching over the children. She accepted his thanks without hesitation, but she also made something clear. "I never meant to overstep," she said gently. "If you want me to keep distance from them, I will." He shook his head slowly. "You didn't do anything wrong," he replied. "You helped them rest." She nodded, relieved, and returned to her work. Still, the rancher watched more closely now, not with suspicion but with attention. He noticed how she spoke to the children when they approached her, always calm, always respectful. She never raised her voice. She never rushed them. When they asked questions, she answered honestly without making things complicated. When they stayed quiet, she let the silence exist. One afternoon, the rancher joined them in the barn. He didn't announce himself. He simply worked nearby, cleaning a shelf and organizing tools. The children were sitting on the floor, drawing shapes in the dust with sticks. The woman was nearby, sorting old supplies. No one spoke much, but no one felt uncomfortable either. At one point, his son asked her if she missed her home. The question hung in the air. The rancher paused, unsure if it was too personal, but the woman answered without hesitation. "I miss parts of it," she said, "but I carry it with me, in how I work, in how I care for others." His daughter asked if she had children. The woman looked thoughtful for a moment before answering. "I did," she said softly. "They live in my heart now." The children nodded as if they understood more than words could explain. They did not press further. They simply accepted the answer and returned to their drawing. That moment stayed with the rancher. He realized that the woman was not hiding her pain, nor was she letting it control her. She carried it with quiet strength. It was a kind of strength he respected deeply. Over the next week, small changes continued. The barn stayed clean. The house felt warmer. The children laughed more often. The rancher found himself sitting at the table longer in the evenings instead of rushing to bed. Sometimes, he even caught himself smiling without realizing it. One evening, after the woman finished her work, the rancher asked if she would stay a few minutes longer. He wanted to talk. She agreed, and they sat outside on a bench near the barn as the sun began to set. He told her about his wife, about how strong she had been, about how everything felt heavier after she was gone. He spoke slowly, choosing his words carefully, not wanting to sound weak but not wanting to hide either. The woman listened without interrupting. She did not try to fix his pain. She did not offer empty comfort. When he finished, she nodded. "Grief changes shape," she said, "but it never truly leaves. We just learn how to carry it without letting it break us." He looked at her, surprised by how closely her words matched his own feelings. For the first time since his wife's passing, he felt understood by someone who did not know her. She shared parts of her own story too, how she lost her husband, how she learned to survive without anger, how work became her way of staying grounded. She did not go into details. She didn't need to. The weight of her experience was clear without explanation. That conversation did not bring sudden healing, but it built something important between them: trust. From that day on, the rancher stopped seeing her only as hired help. He saw her as someone who shared the same road of loss, even if their journeys were different. He respected her boundaries and she respected his. Neither of them rushed anything. The children noticed this change too. They became more comfortable moving between the house and the barn. They included the woman in small moments, like showing her drawings or asking her to watch something they had learned. She always responded kindly, but never took a place that wasn't hers. One afternoon, the rancher returned early from the fields and found the children helping her prepare a small meal in the barn. They were laughing, working together, and enjoying the moment. He didn't interrupt. He simply stood nearby and watched. He realized then that this was not about replacing anyone. It was about rebuilding something that had been broken piece by piece through patience and care. That night, as the stars filled the sky, the rancher sat alone on the porch again. But the silence felt different now. It wasn't empty. It was full of quiet hope. He knew challenges still lay ahead. Trust takes time. Healing takes longer. But he also knew that turning away from this change would mean turning away from something good. Inside the house, his children slept peacefully. In the barn, everything was in order. And within himself, the rancher felt steadier than he had in a long time. For the first time since loss had entered his life, he believed that moving forward did not mean forgetting the past. It meant honoring it by allowing life to grow again. And that belief, gentle and strong, carried him into the next day. Time moved forward in a way that felt slow but steady, like the seasons changing without being noticed day by day. The ranch did not suddenly become perfect, and life did not turn easy overnight. But there was progress, and that mattered more than anything else. The rancher settled into a new routine. Mornings still began early, with the same work waiting for him outside. But now, when he stepped out into the fresh air, he did not feel as alone. The land felt familiar again, not just as a place of responsibility, but as a place of life. He found himself planning the day with more care, making time not just for work, but for the people around him. The woman continued working at the ranch, just as quietly and reliably as before. She never asked for special treatment and never expected more than what was offered. Her presence remained calm and steady. She focused on her tasks, keeping the barn clean and organized, helping where needed and stepping back when her help was not required. This balance made her presence feel natural, not forced. The children grew more confident with each passing week. The boy began taking pride in small chores, eager to show what he had learned. The girl started telling stories again, letting her imagination lead her words. Their laughter returned, slowly at first, then more freely. The rancher watched these changes with deep gratitude, understanding how much they meant. Evenings became a time of quiet connection. Sometimes the woman stayed a little longer, helping finish a task or sharing a simple meal. Other times she left early, respecting the family's space. There was no pressure, no expectations. Everything happened at a pace that felt right. One evening, the rancher invited her to sit with them outside as the sun set. The children sat between them, listening as the sounds of the ranch settled into the night. The sky turned shades of orange and purple, and a gentle breeze passed through the trees. It was a simple moment, but it felt important. The rancher realized then that family does not always look the same for everyone. Sometimes, it is built through shared care and quiet trust rather than through blood or formal ties. This understanding brought him peace. The woman never tried to take more space than was given. She remained respectful of the memory of the rancher's wife, never speaking as if she were replacing anyone. When the children mentioned their mother, she listened with kindness and encouraged them to share their memories. This respect deepened the trust between them all. As time passed, the ranch became a place of healing, not because pain was forgotten, but because it was shared. The rancher and the woman supported each other without needing to explain every feeling. They understood that healing does not erase loss, it simply allows life to grow around it. One afternoon, the rancher sat with the woman near the barn, watching the children play in the distance. He thanked her again for the difference she had made. She replied that the ranch had given her something too, a place to work with dignity, a place where her skills mattered, and a place where she felt respected. Their conversation was quiet, filled with pauses that did not feel uncomfortable. In those silences there was understanding. The rancher thought about the future, something he had avoided for a long time. He knew it would still hold challenges, but he also knew that he was not facing them alone. The idea brought him comfort. The children grew closer to the woman, seeing her as a trusted adult in their lives. They shared their worries and joys with her, and she responded with patience and care. She never replaced their mother, but she became someone they could rely on. As the seasons changed, the ranch showed signs of renewal. New growth appeared in the fields, and the animals thrived. The rancher felt proud of the work they were doing together, proud of the life they were rebuilding. The story ends not with a dramatic moment, but with a sense of hope. The rancher stood one evening at the edge of his land, watching the sun dip below the horizon. The children laughed nearby, and the woman worked quietly in the barn. He understood that life would never be exactly as it was before. Loss had changed them all, but in that change they had found strength, kindness, and a new way to be together. The ranch was no longer just a place of work. It had become a place of healing, trust, and quiet love. And that, he realized, was enough.